Hello, Hawktitan here with a Throne of Eldraine card discussion. We'll be talking about Oko, Thief of Crowns, a blue-green 3-mana planeswalker. Comes into play with 4 loyalty, which is fairly high, plus 2, create a food token, which means that it can be 6 loyalty the first when it comes into play. Plus 1, target artifact or creature loses all abilities and becomes a green elk creature with base power and toughness of 3. -5, exchange control of target artifact or creature you control and target creature an opponent controls with power 3 or less. Now, the plus 2 of a food token is an artifact, so you can use this to both become an elk or gain control of a creature an opponent controls. It also has 2 mana, sacrifice this artifact, you gain 3 life. Not the most primary thing you'll be doing with food, but it is an option. Gilded Goose is another card that's been spoiled with Throne of Eldraine. Flying, when it comes into play, you create a food token. You can use it to create more food tokens with 2 mana. And you can also sacrifice a food and add 1 mana of any color. So you can use Gilded Goose to get out Oko on turn 2, and then you have an engine where Gilded Goose can make food, and Oko can use the food to produce 3/3 elks or steal creatures. Another way to get out Oko is with a Boreal Grazer. You can see that here on screen. So turn 1, you get 2 lands into play. Turn 2, you cast Oko, and then the Grazer can actually start attacking on turn 2 as a 3/3 elk. So that's an aggressive line of play that can be taken. So the +1 ability is a little different than what we've seen on other cards. The cards are not destroyed or exiled, but rather they simply transform. So although they lose all abilities and become 3/3s, they still keep things like counters on them. So if you have a small creature with an enter the battlefield effect that gets counters, a lot like the Explorer package, like Merfolk Branchwalker or Jadelight Ranger, these become 3/3 creatures plus whatever counters they get. So anywhere between 3/3 and 5/5 in the case of Jadelight Ranger. They've already gotten the value, so they get the value and then grow. And there are other creatures like this. For example, we can take some Hydras, such as Hydroid Crassus or Voracious Hydra. Now, typically, casting a Hydra for 4 doesn't produce good value. But with Oko in play, Hydroid Crassus can come down for 2, draw you a card, get you a life, and then become a 5/5 elk on the ground instead of a 2/2 flyer in the air. So there's some early value that can be gained that wouldn't otherwise be there. Now, casting Crassus for 10, you probably want to keep the flying trampler, but I mean, if you need a 13/13 creature on the ground, that's an option too. And same thing with Voracious Hydra. It can come down for 4 mana, fight a creature, and then instead of being a 2/3 trampler, it can just become a 5/5 elk. So there's some pretty good value there. And the last creature I want to talk about is Ugin's Conjurant. Now with Oko, what you're getting is X plus 3 worth of stats for the mana that you've spent. And the downside of having it lose counter as it takes damage, since it loses all abilities, that's no longer a downside. So you're, for 4 mana as an example, you're getting 7/7 worth of stats once it becomes an elk through Oko, which is pretty good. So this is something that might see some play, but we'll have to see. And I would like to take a minute to talk about a planeswalker I think that would work well with Oko, and that's actually Nissa. Now Nissa, her +1 puts 3 +1/+1 counters on a land and makes it into an elemental. And then Oko can take the elemental and then make it into an elk with power and toughness equal to 3, but it keeps the +1/+1 counters. So every turn you're potentially making a 6/6 creature. Now, there are a few things to be careful of. First is you will lose the ability to make mana. So make sure mana is something you have access to for obvious reasons. But also, you can't attack with lands you put into play that turn, because although Nissa gives the land haste, it would lose the haste when Oko turns into an elk, so you can't attack with lands you put into play the same turn. That's something to be wary of, but the ability to make 6/6s every single turn, yeah, that's quite strong and something to be considered. And next, I'd like to talk about one of my favorite cards from War of the Spark, but it hasn't really seen too much play except in the beginning when there's a lot of experimentation going on, and that's Dreadhorde Invasion. Now, every turn, you amass one with Dreadhorde Invasion. You put a +1/+1 on an army you control. If you don't control one, you create a 0/0, and then you put a token on it. So, Oko would take this army token and turn it into an elk with a +1/+1 counter, or potentially more depending on how big the amass is once you start it. But every turn, you can get an elk through Dreadhorde Invasion. So you're going wide instead of going tall. Going tall has been a real downside in this format, especially with Teferi. You put a lot of resources into making something big, and then it just gets bounced, which just feels absolutely terrible. So with this, you can go wide pretty quickly, and you're not losing any mana doing so. So you can still do other things with your cards and your lands. And the downside of Dreadhorde Invasion, the fact that you can take damage, sometimes in certain board states, Dreadhorde Invasion can actually kill you. Well, with Oko's +2, creating a food token, you take a turn off for making an elk, create a food token instead, you can actually gain life. So the downside of Dreadhorde Invasion is mitigated by Oko. So instead of go wide or tall, depending on what you want to do. Dreadhorde Invasion is a really good card to enable this. I'm actually really excited to try this combination out. It's one of the first things I thought of when I saw Oko. So I will be trying this as one of my first decks. So we've talked a lot about the +1 and turning things into elks. Let's take a minute to discuss the -5 and how we can make that ability better. You're stealing your opponent's creatures. Now we can do that with Befuddle type effects. Now I don't actually expect Befuddle to be used, maybe in the sideboard, but making creatures weaker is something that can be considered to basically open your range to steal more things. And I think one of the best for this combination in current standard is actually Muyan Ling. With her +2, you can make a creature -2/-0, loses flying, so you open yourself up to stealing more of your opponent's creatures, and they might not be expecting it. So, and Muyan Ling is quite powerful in her own right, making elementals, or, if you get her alt, draw lots of cards. Uh, but yeah, Muyan Ling there's some space open, and she hasn't seen too much play, but she is quite strong. So that's potentially something that can be done with Oko as well. So yeah, that's my video on Oko, Thief of Crowns. I am actually looking forward to Throne of Eldraine. Hopefully you are all too. If you like this video, let me know. Might do more in the future. This is something I've just started doing. So yeah, thanks for watching.